This show is brought to you by SalCal Real Estate Connections.
Welcome to the Telescope View. We're here tonight with the author of the Final Revelation, the Sun Project, Rick Teles. And of course we have a guest tonight, a UFO enthusiast, Shelby. And yours truly, Larry Mangello. And Rick, tonight, the question is, who can hear our thoughts in our electronic communications?
This is going to get a little weird, if I can say that, because everything we do is a little weird. We're going to talk about the fact that classified rec files have shown, and the people I spoke to made it very clear to me, that this extraterrestrial race that exists, which is a very advanced form of us, really, can hear our thoughts, can hear them in electromagnetic and our electronic communications. And we're gonna explain how that can be through some technology that we're using today and how that kind of works. But before we do that, I want to make sure that Shelby tells you that she's not here against her will. She's actually here because she agreed to be here, and we're not holding her here in the studio against her will. Okay.
Now, Rick, you're saying that they can almost read our minds?
This gets into the concept of a universal consciousness. Almost like the unified field theory that something like that Einstein talked about, that we're all connected. Okay? About a year, maybe 2 years ago, DARPA announced a project called their Radio Bio project. And that project looks into the fact that they believe, and we're starting to believe, that our cells communicate with each other through electromagnetic fields. And they think this can be important not just for biosystems, but for all kinds of biosystems, especially when you're communicating in a cluttered electromagnetic environment. Now, who lives in a cluttered electromagnetic environment besides cells? Every one of us.
Yeah.
I mean, if all these electromagnetic fields and frequencies that we're using today, if they were colors, you wouldn't be able to see us sitting here right now. So that led them to believe that the body does communicate using electromagnetic fields. Now, there's a follow-on to that project called the Biological Communications Project, the Biological Controls Project, where they actually believe that we can use our body to control electronic equipment, to send signals. So DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, is actually looking in this today. So we're going to kind of talk about this to get back to the extraterrestrials and to what they do. So the whole theory here is that the human body has a built-in communication system that uses electromagnetic waves. And there are scientists all over the world today who are starting to believe that this is the case.
So you're actually talking about a mental telepathy. Actually being able to read people's mind,
right?
Or what they're thinking.
Right. I mean, the human body is electric. Okay, we run on electricity. We have nerves, and they send electric impulses. Our brains. So basically, anything electric generates an electromagnetic field, no matter how weak. We run on about 100 watts. Our body runs on about 100 watts. So what's happening is we are radiating electromagnetic fields or electromagnetic radiation. And the photograph that I have up here shows 2 images. And basically all those blue lines and circles that you see show the electromagnetic fields that surround the Earth, and we know those exist. And then also there's a representation of the electromagnetic fields that surround a human body. Okay? Oh. So we take a step forward on this, and everybody's heard about mental telepathy. Sometimes called PSI. PSI is that unknown, or was for years, the unknown element that gave us these telepathic powers, so-called.
Yep.
And since the 70s, the military has had many projects looking into this, especially the Air Force and the Navy. At one point, the Navy was told to stop, and they said, okay, and they didn't. They continued to do it. And a lot of this, people said, oh, no, that's not real. None of this is true. A couple of things have happened. One is, a lot of scientists believe it is possible for the human body to communicate with technology and perhaps other human beings using electromagnetic fields. That's one. Another thing is there's this new technology out there called human body communications. using our body as an antenna to communicate with electronic devices. And we've talked about those before. You had some great examples of what some of these are.
I just mentioned in the last show, Fitbits, even your phone, even if it's just in your pocket or in your purse, tracks your heart rate, how many steps you take, how many stairs you've climbed.
These are technologies that we're starting to use using electromagnetic fields. These are the commercial ones. What could you imagine might be the secret ones? Well, I can tell you what some of the secret ones are. Controlling aircraft, controlling equipment, using your mind to control equipment, using the mind to communicate with perhaps a control center to tell it when we're sick. We're using this in the medical field a lot, this human body communications. They put sensors on you. The sensors use electromagnetic fields and other things to track, what condition your body is in, if there's any problems. A thing I'm going to mention here is I taught classes for many years on business and technology, but one thing I taught a class on communication. And if you take any class on communication, you're going to know that there are 3 basic communication styles for human beings: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Now, visual is easy. A visual type person, or a person who runs with visual style, they like to see things, talk in terms of pictures, show them pictures. That's what they want to hear or see. Auditory people, they got to hear you say it. Tell me that's what it is. They like to ask questions. Then you always got into the kinesthetic, and people always had trouble. What does the kinesthetic mean? And that was always like, well, is that real? You ever have a situation where you go and you do something, everything looks right, but you say to yourself, just doesn't feel right? Or you're talking to somebody and you get the sense that they don't like me, or you get that uneasy feeling. Studies have been shown that people actually can subconsciously be communicating with each other with electromagnetic fields. And that's why you're feeling that. So this kinesthetic stuff is very real. It's not magic. It's not mystery. It's science. It's electromagnetic fields. We're all connected. And I can tell right now you're not happy with me, Larry. I know. I can feel it.
I'm thinking, I'm saying, this thing got something to do with security. Could somebody actually, figure out what you're doing as far as if you're in a war or something?
Well, that could be the problem. The story, the Earth is also surrounded by electromagnetic fields. So we've got a bunch of electromagnetic fields going on here. The Earth has a bunch of electromagnetic fields. So now we're starting to talk about, are we all connected through these fields? There's a thing called the Akashic Record, which they talk about some of these geniuses. Maybe they got these inspirations because out there's a shared consciousness where all of a sudden they tapped into it and they learned this. That's a very interesting concept because what we wrote about in the book is these men told me that what they learned is that this life form, this extraterrestrial race, communicates using electromagnetic fields, but through a shared consciousness. That was one thing what makes them so smart, because they're sharing a knowledge and they can pull it up at any point in time. The other thing they said is that because of their ability through these electromagnetic fields and the shared consciousness, is that they can basically hear our thoughts, just like they're listening to a radio or a Wi-Fi. And you can say on one hand that's impossible, but now just let's look at what we've been talking about. We're kind of doing this today.
We're just not aware of it. They are, and they are using it.
Right, and how many times have we heard we're only using a portion of our brains? We're not using the full power. Maybe, and they say, and some people, they say, are connected in this, and they can do that, and they can sense things.
That's right.
Maybe it's just this electromagnetic field. So you could get to a point where you could just hear other people's thoughts. Now, somebody asked me, well, how do they tune it in and tune it out? I don't know. I'm not that smart. I can't do it. The other thing they said is because of this shared consciousness and the use of electromagnetic fields and waves, they can also basically hear our electronic communications because we use that same type of medium.
So all these thousands of cell phones, and they could actually tune into what's going on?
Yes, but I was told not all of them. I mean, it's like, okay, so what are you talking about? Even they have to be trained to understand the electronic communications because it's a little different.
How do they separate it?
I don't know. So when you see in Hollywood, like somebody's going to jump in their spaceship and come to Earth, it doesn't work that way. This is sponsored stuff. This is state sponsored. Yeah. So their astronauts or whatever they're called, Earthnauts, I don't know. They're trained too to listen for things. Supposedly they also have technology that can process this at rapid speed and feed it directly to their brains.
Oh, wow.
Just like we're starting to do, like you said, the Fitbit stuff. At what point will we not need to actually pick up the telephone to listen to it? But like you said, the problem here is at what point can this information be captured by anybody? Now, I can tell you, in the cyber world, we do a fair amount of this. The NSA has done this for years. They were a little upset when we went away from just radio communications and phone communications. We started getting to the internet because that's what they did. But we can intercept this stuff now today, and we can decode almost all of it, if not all of it. So this is, and we use technology to do it. So to say that at some point our brains might evolve, that we can do this, I don't think that's so far-fetched anymore.
Not at all.
There might be hope for me yet.
All of us, right?
Wow. What a thought. Isn't that
Yeah,
interesting?
that's crazy, but it's not far-fetched at all.
No.
Seeing how far we've come with technology just in the past 5 years.
5 years, yeah. I mean, and look at where we're going.
Yeah.
And one of the concerns here was, of course, by the military. If they can intercept this, can they change the information flow? Could they, on a battlefield, say, we're going to change that and somebody else does something else? Would they have a reason to do that? Do they need to do that?
Wow.
No, I don't really believe that. But this is what they're saying, is that an advanced mind could do this. So now when we hear some of these people who say they could read minds, now probably 90% of them can't. I mean, they ask you enough questions, they know what you're talking about. But then there are people that when they do things, they do brain scans and their brains turn all red when they do certain things like this. And if this is true, and we're starting to see it is true, that we can communicate using electromagnetic fields, what does the future hold for us?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about in the past, people like Tesla, good example. Where did he get this information? Where?
I heard a discussion on this, and Tesla and Einstein actually said some of the same thing. You ever know when you're like half asleep, but you're not all the way asleep, and all of a sudden you get this idea, and it kind of like gives you the answer to something, but then when you wake up, you can't remember it, right?
Always.
But it seems like it's perfectly clear, right? Einstein claims that's what he did. He was able to get into that state, but he was able to remember. That's how he said he came up with the general theory of relativity.
Relativity, yeah.
Yeah, who am I to say no? He did it. I mean, I can't do it. And I think we have to go back, and I always like to level set this because people listen to this and say this is impossible. People can't do this. People can't do this today. All right. We're talking not about Hollywood. We've talked about that before. We're not talking about some wild-eyed alien with antennas and stuff like that. We're talking about, according to top secret classified information, we're talking about people just like us. Maybe 500 years advanced, maybe 1,000. And other things come up with this, and it's a topic we are going to have to address at some time.
That's right. They're our future. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing our future.
And the topic we're going to have to discuss is what role did they play in our life? And we're going to have to talk about Baldacci in the late 90s, early 2000s from the Vatican. He came out and said the Vatican believes, he had a whole, and we'll talk about this, that extraterrestrial life exists. And he said something, I can't remember the Latin, natura fortuva or something like that, which says, nature makes no leaps. And what he was trying to tell us is that missing link, that we didn't just go from here to here. There's a missing link, and nature makes no leaps. And that's what he talked about in his whole discussion of extraterrestrial life. So we're going to have to look at that and at some point discuss what role they may or may not have played in the development of life here on Earth.
Now, when you think about, how do all these electronic communications, to grasp that in itself would be just beyond belief.
Well, I guess you asked the question. We're building these, we were talking about this before, we're building these computers that can, in a matter of seconds go through thousands or even millions of computations. Do we really believe that those computers in the end are more powerful than our brains? I don't. I just think we haven't gotten there yet, that we're still smarter. We know, we talked about this maybe last week, is in the cyber world, we were trying to build artificial intelligence that could tell us about a cyber attack or identify a cyber attack. The computer was not smart enough to do that because it couldn't interpret. It couldn't think by itself as to what could be next. So when you had a 0-day vulnerability in cyber, which means it's the first day you had the virus or whatever it is, computer couldn't figure that out because it couldn't think like that. So we had to combine the artificial intelligence with an actual person. They had to work together in the cyber world. So I think we're still there. I think we're still smarter than any of these machines. But we're talking about a group of people. We're just talking about a group of people who are far advanced than us. And I found it interesting in the last week, all the different shows that come on, whether it be Ancient Aliens or Mysteries of the Unexplained, how now all these scientists step up and now say, there's 100 million galaxies out there. It's huge. It's kind of absurd. He used that word. Absurd to think we're the only ones out here. It's really nuts.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at those artificial intelligence, these robots, I mean, they have every movement just like a human.
Scary.
I mean, it's scary. It scares you. You know, when you think about it.
And they're making them look more and more like people every day. They want them to look, because you're comfortable with them. Well, some of them like cute robots, because, you like those. Where are we going with this? I think it's easy to see the line that we're going down is to create something. Now, that's interesting. We create robots, too, kind of in our own image. Yeah. And where have you heard of that before? Mm-hmm. Man was created in somebody else's image.
Yeah, that's another show.
Well, and we've talked about that. There's a difference between God and religion when you come to this topic.
Absolutely.
Okay, because even according to these men, even this race says, oh no, there is an architect out there so omnipotent that even we can't comprehend its power. But that doesn't mean it's the same as religion.
Well, Rick, as usual, time is flying, and this subject here is just so vast. I mean, I think we could sit here and talk for hours on hours about this intelligence that's coming now in our new technology, but we got to save this for some other show. We got to call it a day today. I want to thank you, Shelby, for coming on the show with us, and I hope you come back.
Well, and I think one last thing that I want to say is, I don't think this should make people panicky or get paranoid or any of that stuff. And like I told people one time, I said, hackers can actually turn on the camera on your laptop. Now everybody was taping their laptop camera. Okay. Are they listening to us? Are they not? Who knows? Do we care? I mean, I would be more concerned that Facebook is listening to everything I say, and so is Alexa. All right, Alexa knows more about me than anybody else.
Everything we do on the internet is being traced anyway.
Right, so. I mean, you were saying you talk on your phone.
Again, with advertising, all of that, So
you talk on your phone, and next thing you know, somebody comes back with an ad for you from something that you were talking about.
Just by a magic wand, right?
So I really wouldn't worry about extraterrestrials listening to you unless you really don't say anything bad about them. Who knows what's going to happen, right?
Yep. Well, Rick, this subject is just unbelievable. I can't wait to get into it again. And I'm going to have to call today.
Well, we got a little bit more time.
We do.
We have a few more minutes that we can talk about.
I wasn't sure. I thought we were at the end of the line there.
It's like maybe I was communicating to you as you were hearing.
I was reading.
But your brains aren't developed enough to actually understand.
We weren't in coercion there. We
were in what? I don't know what we weren't in. Okay, what word are we
telepathy?
looking for? Obviously, we are not aliens because we would have this taken care of.
I'm not sure what.
We're not
coordinated here. We're not coordinating here properly.
But tonight's, this subject is so unbelievable.
I think it's very topical when you talk about, and everybody, telepathy and telekinesis is just the next step. I mean, if you can do certain things, it probably is just the next step.
Well, your phone, recognize who you are, your picture,
facial
voice, recognize your voice,
facial recognition.
And even I mentioned this before, a lot of pets now, you put a microchip in them to track them.
That's right. We can put the microchips in the pets. We know.
So how far until?
We know how far before you put them in children, right?
Or human,
Yeah, right in there. Put them in their ear.
And we're not the only ones that are looking into this. There's been countries in the past that have looked into this too.
Well, in the 80s, the Russians, the Soviets were far ahead of us in terms of this whole topic, what we call PSI, because most of us believe it's nothing. They're also way ahead of us in terms of research with electromagnetic fields. Back in the 80s, I did a project looking at something you've probably never seen, but the old CRT computer screens, the big giant ones, okay? Because it was a cathode ray tube like an old TV, radiation was used. You know, you would get the letters on the screen by irradiating the coding on the screen.
That's right.
So you're shooting radiation at the screen, and the fear was that that was coming through, and the operators were getting, you know, radiation. So we had to do a study on that, and I did that study. Actually had to work. There was Congress had done a study, and they had done some stuff, and they were all wrong. I had to listen to all that and read all that. But what we did we did find a couple of things. One is that, first of all, the radiation that was being used wasn't enough to get through the glass, actually. But the other thing we learned is that the electronics in the computer were more sensitive to the radiation than a biological would be. So it wasn't like that the computer manufacturers were concerned about us. They were more concerned about their equipment. The other thing that I learned, though, is the electromagnetic fields coming out of the ballast of fluorescent lights were far more dangerous than these computers. In fact, the Russians, the Soviets, they would not allow the use of fluorescent lights in their schools.
Really?
Because of this. Now, that's since been fixed. We don't have that anymore. And it was interesting because I worked for a company, and I went to the people I was working for, and I said, this is what I found. They said, well, what do you really want us to do about it? We can't go out and tell the world now that, you know, and I'm not going to mention what their business was, because if I did, you'd know who I was working for. But they're saying, you know, we have interest in both camps. We can't go out and say, you know, one thing or the other.
Yeah.
So the concept of electromagnetic fields has been around for a long time. Now, there's two types of there's strong electromagnetic fields, and then there's what they call ELFs, extremely low frequency electromagnetic fields. That's what was coming through the computer. But both can be used to communicate, and the body actually uses both ELFs and, you know, the standard, the higher one. So that's how that communication takes place. And to think that an advanced race or hey, I mean, you have dolphins that have radar and bats that have radar. We can't do that, you know, so it's extremely possible.
No, the medical field is making some real headway. I mean, you know, they're take your, like, you take your temperature, you stick a thing in your ear. You know, I mean, where'd that come from, you know?
Well, you know, it's one of our favorite shows when people say, well, electromagnetic waves and particle beams. Well, we know we use electromagnetic waves and for a lot of things. Our favorite show, the Curse of Oak Island, they're drilling a hole using electromagnetic waves.
Yes.
The waves, you know, destroy the rock.
Yeah.
They pummel the rock, and then they pull it out using strong electromagnetic field, electromagnetic waves. So it's all possible. It's all how it's directed and how it's put together.
Yeah, you know, the future is going to be great, I'll tell you.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
You know.
Hopefully.
I don't need a car driving. I don't need a car driving for me. I want to drive.
Oh no,
you
you sooner or later, I'm sure you'll do something with an electric car.
When you finally find me that perfect Corvette, I want to drive it, Larry.
boy.
I don't want it. I don't want to have
Only
it.
if we could pick it up at the museum.
My wife thinks you're a bad influence on me, giving me ideas like this.
But then speaking of all of this AI technology that we were just talking about, in the future, it's kind of going to make us almost obsolete. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For like jobs.
Well, you know, and that's happened. I mean, I remember my father-in-law got mad at me when computers came out because he was a printer. Now all of a sudden, computers will do the printing and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the question is, what will we do? Well, maybe we'll move over. I just hope we don't. You know, you ever see the movie Wall-E?
I haven't actually.
Oh, okay. I don't want to be in a floaty chair. I want to, you know, keep doing things. I don't want computers doing everything for me, but think about the people who can't do things and what the machine will be able to do for them.
Absolutely.
You know, so.
Well, I think it's time now. We did call it a day, and it's been a very interesting show. That I will say. Please email us at theviewshow@aol.com. We would like to have a conversation with you and talk about anything you would like to see us talk about on the show. Thank you and good night.